Fatality indeed. That is Maneater in a nutshell. Obviously, Mortal Kombat is probably going to have the distinction for the goriest game this week, but Maneater is pretty close behind. Tripwire Interactive are taking us under the sea for a mauling, brawling, crunching and munching fare. And yes, you get to play as the shark. You get to be Jaws, essentially. Now, this is a really interesting type of game because you can almost consider this a shark PG, in the sense that you start as a level 1 baby shark, and you grow all the way up through teen and then eventually to adulthood. And by doing so, you also gain new abilities like tail whips, and you get to like submerge at faster speeds, you get to move quicker through the waters. You basically get to be a true predator. And that's the interesting thing, is that when you consume different creatures under the deep, they each have different essences. And those essences are then used to develop your abilities. Now, actually, you can develop things like your sonar, so that increases your range and how you can see creatures under the water. But you can also develop your tail whip, and you can also develop your crunching abilities, and all kinds of attributes are developed over a period of time. You know, this is like Jaws, reliving Jaws all over again. There was that real fear and terror when you first watched Jaws, and especially way back when. So Maneater really kind of instills that in you a little bit, especially when you can see some of the things you can do. Like, it kind of makes you feel a bit like, my gosh, yeah, how easily a shark, quickly you can just be devoured. They are intimidating predators, that's for sure, and Maneater really captures that quite marvelously. Now, Maneater's not really a long game. You can probably do it in about 10 to 12 hours. There are lots of hidden secrets to find as well in each area, but you will eventually outgrow each area over time. And once you do that, then basically any enemies that come against you, this is actually an interesting ability as well. So using a thrash, when you've basically got a same likened level to a creature you're trying to consume, then you have to thrash them between your jaws in order to consume them. Now, once you enter the grotto area, you can then actually level up your abilities. So you're going to see here, you can actually, you can have kind of armor, you can have skins to yourself, but actually you can develop your essences as well. So you start out with like a sonar, which basically enables you to increase your radar and see enemies and creatures from afar, but then it also develops much further as well. I guess the best way to describe Maneater is kind of like Ecco the Dolphin for adults, because as you've seen, there's a lot of gore, there's a lot of munching and crunching, and it's just essentially, it's an eat 'em up. Which is, I mean, there's not much more to Maneater than that. It really does what it says on the tin, but having said that, it's just so ridiculously good fun. And in some weird way, it's actually given me more of an appreciation for sharks. They're such badass creatures. You know, there are some shark facts scattered in between. I mean, obviously, as you can see there, you've got different mission objectives. So initially you start up by having to kill catfish by eating them, but then they also get sort of limited targets under the water. They're kind of like a form of elite creatures. Then eventually you have to kind of outgrow and keep eating and grow up your level until you're eventually able to compete with the alligator, who at the moment is currently running roost in this swampy-like area. And once you do that, essentially you become kind of the king of the waters, or the queen of the ocean for that matter. What I really like about Maneater, and yes, it's violent, yes, it's gory, yes, it's brutal, but also it really allows you to explore underwater, which is surprisingly a fresh concept in this day and age. Most games nowadays kind of just like your human character can only take a certain amount of time before they're going underwater, and then they're choking to death and you have to bring them back up to the surface again. But in this case, yes, of course, you do suffocate if you go out of land, but that's the interesting thing. Rather than suffocating on land, which you kind of be familiar with from most other games, now you're kind of like just trawling the waters. So as you can see here, my current objective, I'm kind of right where I need to be. I need to find these catfish, but also you can see there are 2 alligators there ready to bite my head off. So I'm really literally, I start out, I guess this is an interesting point with the game. It really does give you a false sense of security. It really like allows you to just be a badass shark of the highest level. You can basically do anything a shark can do. But then it kind of starts you right at the bottom of the food chain as well. So you really have to be prepared to have a big adjustment period. So you've kind of been led with this false sense of security that you can eat anything, do anything, nothing can touch you, nothing can harm you, and then all of a sudden you are literally running around for your life trying to get away from the jaws of an alligator or run away from the jaws of other creatures which are really going to kick your ass. So that's the beautiful thing about Maneater. You really do have to develop very, very quickly. But that also does help with a sense of progression. So when you actually are in these underwater areas and you kind of do sort of outgrow these areas, initially while you've been hunted, you do become the hunter, and it feels very much like you're the hunter. Like fishes and creatures and sea life will really fear you. And that's the thing. I mean, like, obviously we've mentioned that you essentially get to be Jaws in this, and there have been some Jaws licenses, like Jaws Unleashed probably is the most famous. But what I would say is that, like, those games haven't really hit the mark. But I guess all Universal really needs to do is get Tripwire involved, because they've really nailed that feeling of just swimming underwater and eating and just being the king and queen of the ocean. But it's strange because also there is a real comedy feel to this game, so it's kind of like being narrated. It's almost like an American documentary style. I kind of feel like we might have been better suited maybe by having a kind of a David Attenborough Blue Planet style, where it really sort of like articulates and really build that tension when you're in the dramatic fight sequences. But instead you've kind of got that kind of American kind of talk through, which is it works as well for this game, but the comedy edge to it only goes so far, I think. So what you essentially have with this is a title that is full of brutality and viciousness, and but then you also offset that little bit with humor. But I mean, game developers don't really get to explore underwater these days, and I think that makes for a really refreshing aesthetical change for this game. You really just want to explore and just go around. There's no worry about you're running out of breath or running out of air. You could just keep going and going and going, really exploring the kelp and the bottom of the ocean and the sea life, and seeing all the kind of seeing everything from a new perspective, I suppose, which is really, really refreshing. It is essentially an open underworld, but you do get to see the effects, obviously, toxicity is having on the waves, the disregard humanity has for the deep, the deposit in the trash, and also you get to go down those deep caverns, which always seem to be you never really would dare to venture if you were just going snorkeling. It's pretty amazing. But as I say, you're eating creatures, you fulfill objectives, you discover secrets, you level up, and of course you upgrade your abilities. And I think that's just the beauty of this game, is that it really is the sense of progression, as I've mentioned, but also like there are different areas to keep exploring. You see different aspects, you see different aesthetical changes, you'll obviously encounter different sea life over time. As mentioned as well, there's a lot of collectibles to find. There are license plates hovering around in the areas. You sometimes have to go onto land in order to get them. Sometimes you can perform huge leaps out of the water in order to catch them. But I do find as well, like, even though there's so many side objectives in Maneater and there's so many little things to do and collect and see, you see there I've just reached level 2, so I'm gradually growing as a shark, and those those crates do essentially help with that, but you actually gain a lot of resources which really help you grow much quicker, so it's always worth seeking those out. But Maneater's activity kind of stops short of you've got objectives that regularly necessitate you to kind of chomp on humans. There's always a kind of a set criteria. There's always a certain amount of creatures you need to eat, or a certain amount of humans you need to eat, and essentially though it all builds up towards you have these kind of prime targets, these hunters. Without going too much into the story, even though it's not really a compelling story, but I don't really want to spoil it for you. But essentially, without going too deep into it, you really you're on a mission of revenge. You have a taste for human flesh, and you want to make sure that those who are trying to hunt and kill the sharks and prevent them from becoming, the kings and queens of the ocean, you want to make sure that actually you're doing your part to stop those hunters, and also saving, in a weird way, saving all the other sea life that you're getting consumed. You may be bottom of the food chain right now, but your aim is to reach the top. And I think what's quite interesting about this is like it's kind of a circle of life aspect here, in the sense that you're trying to, even though you can eat everything under the water because you're the alpha, you don't want humanity to get involved in that circle, essentially, so you're doing your part to prevent that. But I think really the great thing about this is the sense of progression. It's something that's not really that prominent in many RPGs nowadays. You really kind of struggle to feel that sense of progression when you're in the game, and it's not always appropriate. It doesn't always feel like you've actually, it feels like you've been fighting the same enemies for level after level after level, and you just gradually chip. It's the difference of chipping away at their health to all of a sudden taking a few chunks off. But this actually makes you feel like you have dominance and power over that which used to present a challenge, and that is quite something. That's quite a feeling that's been produced in the game. So absolutely, if you're looking for something you can switch off and have a bit of fun with, I can't really recommend anything much more right now. It's kind of the perfect game in that sense. It's quite violent, so obviously it's not one for kids, but it's also one to kind of just you know, you can also have a bit of fun with as well. So yeah, something to think about. But this is actually one of those collectibles I've mentioned. You got lots of underwater sort of markers, and you actually get to see little secrets and landmarks which kind of like tell stories about lost stories, which are quite interesting and fascinating. Problem with Maneater, it can be a little bit repetitive. Obviously, as I said, it's just eat and keep eating. And obviously, some environments can seem a little bit similar. As I say, the creature's appetite may be insatiable, but eventually yours won't be. You will kind of feel a little bit tired out by this and probably want to revisit it at a later point. But having said that, this is a game that I've really felt compelled that I want to 100%. I really want to kind of get all those trophies, get the platinum, and I really just want to finish the game really and in full. And because I find it incredibly enjoyable, and I find that quite a rare commodity, actually wanting to complete a game all the way through to 100%. That's not something that I've encountered very much these days, because sometimes I find, you know, there's almost too much in some games. But yeah, I mean, that's Maneater. As long as you don't take it too seriously, Maneater is definitely one to check out. That's going to do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope it didn't gross you out too much with all the blood and the violence. Obviously, there's many more videos on the channel, so make sure to take time to check those out, and we'll see you for the next one.